Anybody have any questions for Patty?
I do.
Go ahead.
What's the date?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just skipped right over that. So we have been kicking around a lot of different dates, and I actually just got a call from Ben Wade actually yesterday, and confirmed that the date the symphony has their musicians from out of the area coming to participate will be Saturday, September the 16th. And as far as I know right now, we're not conflicting with any other things going on that day, and it will be a one-day event, a Saturday. And like I said, we'll start in the morning with a presentation at the monument, and then lead into the courthouse in the afternoon, followed into the symphony event in the evening, and that will conclude the event.
Who else has put money in this, Patty?
Who else has put money into
Yeah.
it? No.
Nobody?
No.
Are you guys going out trying to get the businesses to?
We are not, because the businesses are hit up constantly. Now, that doesn't mean that
I'm very aware of that.
that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean we won't have contributions that will be made by organizations, because with the 150th anniversary, we did have a lot of contributions made by the business community. But right now, because we're in the beginning planning stages, I have not approached anyone. But I can assure you that if we need something and we're not going to be able to make it without them making the donation, I'm sure that they will be generous enough to donate.
So are you going to have the food catered?
No, what we're talking about doing is allowing some of the organizations like the Rotary, CHP. We haven't approached all these people yet, but we'd like to let the organizations come and participate and be a part of the day. And so we'll allow them to make a little bit of money from the event and encourage them to participate in that fashion.
Corn dog booth.
Yes, exactly. Some corn dogs, some fried tip sandwiches, those kinds of things. So we're hoping that we'll have enough participation from the organizations that will provide a variety of things. Catering is a little bit tough.
Yeah.
So that's
expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive, and it's really a difficult thing to do because we can't really gauge how many people you're going to end up having come.
That was my next question. What's your expected crowd size?
So we had about 600 people attend the 150th anniversary celebration that we had in the park. Thank you. Yes, I was drawing a blank. Where did we have that? In the park. And so we're anticipating the same amount for this. I think that, and we might end up even having more because the symphony is attached to it. And so we may end up having a larger crowd than we've had for that. But we're estimating 500 to 600 people.
So you're not charging for the food?
No, we will not be charging for the food, but the organizations that we bring on board will be charging for the food.
Okay.
I guess one of the reasons I asked for this to be waived, we have a little more information, was basically for the budgetary deal. The $5,000, it is a substantial amount of money, and we do have limited funds here. I just wanted to kind of hear where the money was going to be spent, how it was going to be spent, and et cetera. You did a very good job of explaining that, and I appreciate that. I kind of tag on to what Tom said. My own concern is, is that the county is going to be spending this money, but there's also going to be a lot of people that are also benefiting from this influx of the large people, and I would like to see them make a little bit of a contribution as well, because they're also going to be the direct beneficiary of these dollars. So I would like to see a little help from them as well, and that's kind of where I was going with my asking how you did it. Yeah.
So the food providers, when they charge you, does the chamber get a percentage of their?
That is our intent. Our intent is to coordinate an event on behalf of the county and use those funds to pay for the cost to make that event happen. So our intent is not to take from the organizations that participate with us. We feel like it's a partnering situation, and this is supposed to be a celebration, something that we can all come together with. And so, we're not really taking it as an event that we're going to make money on.
Well, I wasn't intending on making money, but maybe breaking even would be good.
Well, and it's a good point, because I think a lot of organizations right now are throwing events, and they are making them fundraisers. And that's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. But this event is aimed as promotional as, but it's not even that. Promotional is almost a base word. It honors the tradition that we have for 100 years of justice.
Historical education.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at the courthouse in the front of it, as you're walking up the steps, the first thing that it talks about is the last extrajudicial hanging that occurred in our county, and it was like 1909. And so whomever put that there, and I don't know who it was thinking of not just their own time, but they were telling part of our story, which is in 1909, justice was determined by a mob, but then after that, we had a system set up, however imperfect, that allowed our disputes to be adjudged and adjudicated fairly, or as close as we could get to it. So like I say, I understand the point about fundraising, and those events become a chance to fundraise, but that's not the intention of this event.
I mean, it'd be great if we made a little money, but that is, what our intention isn't to go into it thinking, okay, how are we going to make money off the event? I think the goal is really to celebrate, something that we should all be proud of, a beautiful old building that still stands in our community and has a lot of history and has a lot of uniqueness. The stones were quarried here in Lassen County. You can't get them anywhere else. There's just a lot of neat history that goes with that. And I think it reminds people of our history, brings them back to that, and gives them a little bit of pride in the community. So, and the other things that we're planning on that I kind of didn't speak to, and seeing David reminded me, we're also talking about, I don't know how many of you are aware that at one time there were going to be plaques. Every one of those trees was planted in memory of someone that was serving in the service at the time. And for whatever reason, only 2 plaques got put up. The rest of the trees never got recognized for that, whoever they were supposed to be designated for. So we're actually planning on completing that project.
Well, there's a Boy Scout and an Eagle Scout that do it. So World War I veterans. They got 2 names done in 1930 something.
Yeah.
And now 80 years later, 90 years later, I'd like to complete something that we set out to do. I mean, now that we have cameras, we talk about the speed of government. Well, here the speed of government is 90 years and counting.
Yeah, for whatever reason, they got kind of left behind. So we'd like to see that completed and be part of the celebration and part of the history that we'll talk about when we do the tours. So I think that that what we are planning on doing will make you all proud. So.
And I think you and I talked about this last week, Tom. This is a great opportunity for us to promote tourism and get that advertisement out there. And especially if we're going to target some of these veteran groups, we're going to look at World War I, putting the plaques in there, and that might. No, there aren't. I don't think there's any way old at this point. But that would also target another group that may want to come and attend, so that might get some other people up this way as well.
And I appreciate that you guys would like to see other funds coming in, but the reality is I'm standing before you today so that we can move forward, because we literally have 6 months at this point in the game from the time that this event will be taking place. And in order for us to really do a good job and get some advertising out there and get the plans really set in place, we need to know that the funds are going to be available to cover the cost. And so, really, for what we would like to do with it, it's important to kind of get that commitment from you so that we can move forward and make that happen. It all takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And events like this, there's a lot of coordination that goes on. And in order to get the word out to outside communities and maybe get that chance for tourism, we have to be thinking way ahead. So.
Well, I agree. I was glad that you could make it here today. Last week, David, he was very eloquent. But we just had some questions he couldn't answer. So anyway, we're glad that you could.
Good job trying, David.
I move that we approve spending $5,000 give it to the chamber to coordinate this party.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Hemphill and a second by Gallagher. Can you get the motion to go?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other discussion?
Let us know if there's anything that we can do to assist you in that, because I'd like to become involved in that. I'm sure David would.
Yeah, David's
well,
already.
so, yeah.
I'm going to get things
So if you need some extra help.
But I think inviting the city, and they should want to take part in this.
Yeah.
To help out with it.
And I appreciate the offers, and I will definitely be taking you guys up on it. So, thank you.
Okay, no other comments, all those in favor, signify by
Mr. Chairman, before you, could we clarify that the motion is to include all of the recommended actions, which is to also include Public Works in assisting in the event?
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that included in the 5,000?
There's something about the bid here too, and I didn't bring that up. We're gonna waive a permit fee to ourselves, aren't we?
And I apologize, but
Pay Paul?
one additional thing that I don't know if it's highlighted, I apologize, I didn't read through it well enough. The possibility to get permission to serve alcohol on the premises, I don't believe that that's probably permitted at this point, but so that we could serve beer or wine during the event.
Sure.
It is included, okay.
It's in the action.
Yeah.
So this is the action as recommended. Approve expenditure and authorize CAO and the Department of Public Works to work with the Chamber to obtain any necessary permits or approvals to use the county property for the 100th anniversary celebration of the courthouse.
And then additionally on the, special event permit, health report allowed, let's add that in there right now so there's no question. So if they wanted a ABC permit,
wouldn't that be part of the necessary?
I interpret it to be broad enough to allow that
okay,
action.
Yes.
okay.
And I'm reluctant to go penning things in on the agenda today. There's Eileen when you want her.
Call your attention to that.
I think it covers it. Ron.
That's good.
I believe so.
So we're good with that, the motion maker, seconded, okay, any other discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that, and we'll look forward to a great celebration.
With that, we will move on to, I think we had a time certain item for 10 o'clock. The auditor.
Good morning, I am Nicole Lassen, County Auditor. At this time, I'd like to introduce Austin. You know Austin? Yep. Almost came close. He is our outside auditor from Price and Page and Company, and he will be reviewing our Lassen County basic financial statements and answering any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to come and share the results of the audit. I thought it might be helpful for us this year if we could put it on the screen, and as I kind of worked and talked through it, we could all make sure we're looking at the same thing because it's a 130-page document. And so I understand I have maybe somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes, and so that should be plenty of time to share with you the results of the audit. So this is our fourth year, Price Page and Company. I'm the managing partner of the firm and the audit partner. This year we had a team of 5 people assigned to your audit, and we completed the work. I think the audit report date, if we can get to probably about the third, yeah, right there, yeah. So if we kind of scroll down to the bottom, the third page of that, we'll see we recently issued the opinion that effect for March 22. So this is fresh off the press. If we can scroll back up to the top of that. So what I'd like to do is, this is June 30, 2016 number. So what I'd like to do is not so much focus on the numbers, but talk to you about the audit process and what it is that we did in the audit to give you some level of comfort with respect to that process. And so I'm going to kind of talk through the independent auditor's report here. So basically the first paragraph just describes the financial statements that were audited. That second paragraph talks about management's responsibility for the financial statements. And so there's a couple of things that are important there. Basically, management is responsible for the preparation of the financial statements, although that is outsourced to us. So not only do we audit the financial statements, we prepare the financial statements. In some jurisdictions, for example, the auditor would not prepare financials. The auditor simply audits financials that are presented to them. That being the case, we printed and bound all of these copies, and I've got a bunch of them there in my car that we'll leave with you. But those financial statements come to us in draft form from the auditor controller. And so although we are preparing and printing and binding them, that information is really coming from the Auditor Controller's Office. Second part of that paragraph talks about the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control. So I think we should be clear that the internal control is a responsibility of management. So as auditors, we are not a part of your internal control system. We're hired to audit and to determine, number one, whether the financial statements are fairly presented. And in the process of doing that, we're required to obtain an understanding of your internal control system. As we obtain that understanding, if we identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in that system, then we're required to report those to you. But it is management that's responsible for designing a system and for making sure that that system is functioning properly. From an audit perspective, we're very interested in internal controls, though, because the audit process requires that we conduct a risk assessment. And so there are way too many transactions for us to look at all of them, obviously, and so we apply some sampling techniques. However, if we believe that you have weaknesses in your internal control system, just as an example, let's say that in your disbursement system that you don't have the proper controls in place, then we'd say, geez, there is a risk because the system isn't functioning properly. There is a risk that something could go wrong, that something could go very wrong. And as auditors, we're interested in two things. We're interested in errors, identifying errors, and we're interested in identifying fraud. Those are the two areas that we're focused on in the audit, errors and fraud. And so the functioning of your internal control system and the design of that internal control system is very important to us. So we obtain an understanding of it, and then we assess the risks. And so with respect to your receipt system, to your payroll system, tax collection system, all of that, we're obtaining an understanding and assessing risk. And then we're designing audit procedures and audit tests to see if anything, in fact, did go wrong. And so that's where we confirm sometimes with third parties, where we pull documents and look at source documents to make sure, for example, that disbursements are properly supported, that the proper signatures are in place, that things were authorized, etc. So again, the audit process is just that, obtaining an understanding of what you're doing and determining whether that's functioning effectively, then applying tests to make sure that everything was recorded in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And so generally accepted accounting principles are issued, promulgated by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So they set the rules. It's your job here then to account for your transactions and to prepare financial statements in accordance with those rules. And so from the auditor's perspective, what we're looking for is ensuring that you have accounted for things and reported things in the financial statements in accordance with those rules. And so that is what our audit is doing. Now you actually have two audits. You have an audit of the financial statements, and separately you have an audit of your federal award programs, which I'll cover here after the financial statements. So all of that, second page of our report at the top says opinions, and so that is the key here of this report. And so this is what's called an unmodified opinion, which basically says that in our opinion the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with governmental accounting standards. And so it's also, we might call it a clean opinion, but that is the best type of opinion that you can receive, an unmodified opinion. If we were to issue a modified opinion, it would mean everything's okay except for this area. So that wouldn't be great. Or what's called an adverse opinion, which says, no, as an auditor, we can't attest to these financial statements. That would be horrible, right? And so, and there's a fourth type of opinion that we call a scope limitation, which says, geez, the records were in bad shape, people didn't answer our questions, and so we can't even issue an opinion. So again, you've received an unmodified opinion. I think what I will do now, though, is just very quickly go take a look at a couple of the financial statements and share with you maybe some of the significant footnote disclosures that you may have an interest in. And so I'm going to jump over to page 26, please. while we're getting there, there's a significant part of these financial statements that's called a management discussion and analysis. That MD&A for short is a narrative about the financial activity of the county. That document, we as auditors are specifically precluded, we can't prepare that. So we get that from the auditor controller intact, and we incorporate that into financial statements. And the Governmental Accounting Standards Board made a decision that it was important that management describe its financial activity in a narrative format, comparisons to prior years, etc., and that the auditors should have nothing to do with that other than to confirm that the numbers in that document agree with the audited financial statements. But I wanted to cover here just quickly, this is a balance sheet, and we're at page 26. And so right at the top it says major funds, and so you'll see general, road, community, and there's a second page with more funds. However, just to take a quick look at how to read one of these financial statements very quickly here. So a balance sheet is a listing of assets and liabilities, basically. So assets minus liabilities equals equity. And so as individuals, for example, we might think of net worth. Our assets minus our liabilities equals our net worth. In the county, a balance sheet is similar. And so in this case, for example, you see in the general fund you have cash of $5.5 million, deposits with others of $4.5 million. Bottom line, total assets of $10.7 million. Liabilities here, we show only $256,000. The interesting thing is that in governmental accounting, for a fund financial statement, you show your assets, but you only show your current liabilities. You don't show those long-term liabilities. So you have, for example, long-term capital lease, but that doesn't require current resources. You don't have to pay that immediately. So the Governmental Accounting Standards Board prescribes this format and says, show your assets, show the current liabilities, but not those long-term liabilities. That's been changing slowly, and I'll talk in a minute about the pension liability as the standard setters basically have said, geez, it hasn't maybe been great to not report or show all of your liabilities, and so they've been bringing those liabilities back onto the balance sheet. So if we scroll down, Richard, please, right to that section. The fund balance section, we might call it again the net worth section. So if we just focus there on the general fund, which is the very first column, you'll see an unassigned category that says $5.8 million. And so that is the portion of the general fund that is unassigned to any specific or particular purpose, unreserved, etc. And if we jump then over a couple of pages, Richard, we'll go to an income statement. Let's keep going and go through this schedule. One more page. Yeah, right there. So jump just a little bit. Sorry, I guess you... It's a tough day for that, huh? So this is an income statement for your general fund. It's got a long title, but basically a profit and loss or an income statement. And so you'll see there in the general fund taxes of $8.9 million, intergovernmental revenues of $4.3 million, total revenues of $17.6. And if we scroll down a little bit, we'll see total expenditures of only 8.6, almost 8.7 million. So the general fund's in pretty good shape, right? $8.9 million. However, if we scroll down a little bit more, we'll see that transfers out were 9.3 million. So the general fund's getting the revenues, and then it's making transfers to your other funds to cover roads, cover public safety, all of those other costs, welfare, etc. that you have. And so, again, so the general fund's healthy. It takes that money and it provides the funding for your other services that you're required to provide as a county. And so that is what this income statement is showing. Now, I'm going to jump back to... Let's go to page... Make a big jump here. We're going to go to page 60... Yeah, let's go to page 66. So a couple years ago, the GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, made a decision that they wanted to start reporting the pension liability, the unfunded pension liability. In the past, the rule basically was if you had got an invoice from PERS for $300,000 and you paid that invoice, that was the current year's required contribution, you would not record the unfunded liability that existed. You'd pay that bill and you were done. However, Gadsby said, geez, there's this big liability out there because the liability might be 100 million and you only have assets of 80 million. And so we want to report that liability. And here on page 66 is a table that shows the liability for your agent plan, which covers most of your employees in the county except for public safety, which is in a different plan we'll take a look at in a minute. So for example, here you might see that the balance of June 30, 2015 of that liability was 105, almost 106 million dollars. But this planned fiduciary net position, which basically assets that you had in place, were almost 90 million. So you had a net pension liability, an unfunded amount of $16 million. That was at the end of June 30, 2015. If you drop to the bottom of this schedule, June 30, 2016, you'll see that the total liability went to 109. Your assets are still around 89 million, and so you have a liability, an unfunded liability of $20 million. Now again, that you don't get that bill next week, right? So PERS is increasing its basically the annual required contribution. So the invoices that they're sending, not just your county, but governments across the state, so that they can start to make up that shortfall. So this is your agent plan again that is covering most of your employees. If we go a few pages, let's see here, let's go to page 69. Just a couple pages back. So this is in what's called your cost sharing plan. So the plan that we just looked at, so you have two plans here, PERS. One where you have kind of your own pot of money and your own liability there with PERS, and this cost sharing plan where you're in a group with a whole bunch of other governments, and you just have a little piece of that pie. However, at page, we're at 69? Yeah, so page 69, right at the top there, yeah, it says as of June 30, 2016, the county reported a net pension liability for its proportionate share of the net pension liability of the plan as a whole of $10 million. So that's your liability for this plan, right? So the liability of the plan as a whole is, I don't know how many billion, but your share of that is only $10 million. Again, for this plan, you're in a pool with everybody else. So, you know, if your stock rises, everybody's does, and if yours falls, I mean, everybody does as a group. So, these liabilities are now on the financial statements. And so that was a big change that happened just a couple of years ago. There's another liability. If we go over to page 73, we call this OPEB, but it's other post-employment benefits. And so these are retiree health care costs. And so currently, under the current standards, the actuary does a calculation and says, in order for you to fund this liability over the next 20, 30 years, you need to make a payment of X. If you make your payment, no liability is recorded. However, the new rule that is going to be effective for the year ended June 30, 2018, is that if you have an unfunded amount, that liability is going to have to be recorded in your books. And so, if we go kind of to the next page, actually, I think, Richard. So let's scroll down a little bit more to the second table there. So, so based on an actuarial evaluation that was done June 30, 2015, you'll see the actuarial asset value of $5.2 million. The liability was almost $5.9 million. So actually there was a small $645,000 unfunded liability. What you did, which is unique, I don't even know how many people in the whole state do this, but you actually pre-funded that. So you knew that liability existed, and it was 3 years ago, or 4, or even 5 now? Yeah, time flies. But you actually recognized you had that liability, and you put money into the plan, right, to cover that. And so basically you got to zero. And the numbers now are just fluctuating a little bit. So having basically a $650,000 unfunded liability, that number can easily change when the actuary does their new calculation. So you're up or down a little bit. And so that's kind of one of the unique things about the County of Lassen, is that you actually pre-funded a fairly significant liability, and you're unique in that. So I think with respect to these financial statements, maybe just one other thing to share with you. Over on page 85. So this is, we looked at the general fund earlier, but I wanted just to point out, so you have a budget for your general fund, and so this is a statement that shows your actual against your budget. And so, for example, the very first two columns have a heading that says budgeted amounts. You had an original budget and then a final budget with some minor changes to it. That third column says actual amounts, and so that's what actually transpired. So you can see that you budgeted for 18.5 million of revenues, and 17.6 of revenues actually came in, which is pretty good. So you were off by $925,000. But if you think about it, a budget is a forecast. You're looking into the future, and you're making your best guess about what's going to happen. So I think that's pretty good. On the expenditure side, you budgeted 9.7, and you spent 8.7 roughly. So about $1 million off there. And so bottom line, your revenues minus your expenditures, which we looked at on the other statement, were about $8.9 million. You budgeted about 8.8. So again, basically a pretty good job there with your budgeting coming in line with what actually is happening. And so this is for the general fund. If you continue to the other pages, you'll see the same type of thing for your other funds. So again, my focus was on the audit, but just kind of wanted to share some of those numbers with you. Does everybody have a copy of the single audit report as well?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe just very quickly, it's important that we cover the federal single audit report. So I'm going to jump to this separate document. Do we have that one too? And if not, it's a short.
minutes.
Okay.
There it is.
And so a couple of reports that we issue here, if we go down to page 1 on our letter, Richard. This is an independent auditor's report in accordance with government auditing standards. And so we issue a report on internal control over financial reporting. I talked about that earlier. If we had identified any weaknesses, we'd be required to report those to you. We did not identify any weaknesses in your internal control system. If we go to the next page, then there's a section on compliance. Oh, just up a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Too far.
Yeah. So still this report, a report on compliance, right there, yeah, as a part of obtaining assurance about financial statements, we're also taking a look at compliance that could have a direct and material effect on the financial statement amounts. No compliance issues to report to you. So we'll go to a second report, which is a specific report issued on your federal grants.
That's a separate.
No, right in this document. That's all right.
Okay.
It would be page 3 of that same document. Yeah. If you keep going to the next page. Yeah. So if we see here, yeah, so independent auditors report on compliance for each major program. So as the federal government requires that if you expend federal dollars in excess of $750,000 a year, which you obviously do, that you have what's called a federal single audit. And so they call it a single audit because prior to that Single Audit Act in 1984, a county like yours that received funding from multiple federal agencies would have auditors coming from all of these different agencies to audit their money. And they said, this is kind of a waste. Why don't we have the external auditor that audits your financial statements do a single audit and have them do all of this compliance testing? So, in any case, there's a process through which we go to determine which of your federal programs we're required to take a look at. And if we jump, Richard, over to page 8 of this document, there's a schedule there with all of your federal awards, but we're going to go to page 8, which is a summary to kind of wrap up here. So with respect to your federal programs, this is a summary. The type of auditor's report issued says unmodified. And again, remember, that's the best type of report, meaning there were no issues. With respect to internal control, the question, material weaknesses identified? No. Significant deficiencies identified? No. Non-compliance, material financial statements? No. So these are all good things. With respect to the federal awards themselves, material weaknesses? No. Significant deficiencies? No. Type of auditor's report, unmodified. Any findings disclosed required to be reported? No. And then there's a listing there of the 3 programs that we tested as a part of this federal single audit. And so those are rotated based on a criteria that's developed by the federal government. And the final piece there asks, did the auditee qualify as a low-risk auditee? And because you had no significant deficiencies, you have. And so there were no findings to report. I think that was probably 20 minutes. I'm glad to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. First, I'd like to thank staff and the auditor's department for staying within or under budget. Good job there. With our budget deficits, it's really critical right now that we maintain that budget. This question's for you. You deal with a lot of counties and special districts, how the counties deal with special, and the JPAs. I've always seen a lot of problems with those in my district as far as their numbers, and how does that affect the county?
Well, so if they're separate legal entities, then
Yes, they are.
yeah, and theoretically they would not have an impact on the county other than if they don't provide some service that the county, I guess,
So if
decided.
their numbers are skewed, it doesn't affect the county in any way, shape, or form?
It doesn't affect the county's financial statements, and again, other than, just as a citizen, I'm thinking if there's a local governmental agency that's supposed to do something, they don't do it, and if somebody else steps in, maybe there's some.
I'm just wondering how other counties handle this. Everybody's special districts are difficult.
Well, I can help answer that question. Every special district is supposed to have an annual audit.
Yeah, I know.
Now, whether they do or not is another
And
question.
how good the audit is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you, just from my experience in doing special districts, I'd be just absolutely, jumping up and down with joy to have an unmodified audit. Because being in a small district, you have the issue with not enough separation of duties because of the smallness of those districts. So having an unmodified audit is great, and I'm happy to see that we're even not in the same position as a lot of different counties where we have all these unfunded liabilities. I'm happy to see that we're funding a lot of those liabilities and being ahead of the curve instead of behind it and broke like a lot of other counties and municipalities are. So I echo what you said. The staff has done a great job, and I think they did a great audit.
I would like to agendize this audit to go through it. Richard, when I first got on the board, we went through one, and you explained it very well to me. I have a lot of questions about this that aren't for him, and maybe for Diana. And I'm sure these other board members would like to go through this thing and get a comprehensive look at this, because there's things in here that just don't really make sense to me. And so if we could spend a day doing that, I think that this is the lifeblood of the county. And we need to know what's going on with the money in the county.
Okay. I would just comment that I think, that's true. It's all very important. There's a lot of good information in there. But the numbers we're looking at here, for example, are as of June 30th, 2016.
Yeah.
It might be more helpful to look at the budget process.
That's fine. However you decide to present that to us would be very helpful to me.
No, I think Tom's kind of right, Richard. I think you're right. To go through it to budget time, rather than just have the overall budget, we break it up over 2 or 3 day period, and each department head come in and go through all the line items to different funds. I think that would be kind of the place to go through, especially with the new boards to get that done. But that's something we can work on later.
Yeah.
I got a question for the auditor, and that is, I think that Lassen County, we're doing a lot of right things by pre-funding and hard-funded liabilities, et cetera. As a professional, do you see, because you do other audits for other counties or other institutions, is there something that the other counties or other entities are doing that are putting themselves ahead of the curve that maybe Lassen County could be doing as well that you see maybe as a potential for us to look at?
Nothing comes to mind really. You're a fiscally conservative county, and I've been CPA 25 years, so I applaud that. I value that, and so it's refreshing especially in this state, without a chair. But if I identified, just as we're doing our audit process and we're working with the auditor department, sometimes there might be things that we see systemically that are not wrong, but so our auditors are having conversations about some of those things. Nothing comes to mind that was significant, but actually Auditor Control and I are going to meet after this meeting to just talk about the process and see how it can continue to be improved. And so we're always doing that. But again, nothing that is a control issue, and financially, again, just you're a fiscally conservative county, and it looks to me like you're doing a lot of the right things, which is why I wanted to point out the fact that you funded that OPEB retirement liability. I have one client that has $1 billion liability. So local government is not and in the budget, general fund budget to actual, I think that's key. You have great segregation between your departments, and everybody's been extremely professional and focused on process, which in some places you start to forget that or think that it's just bureaucracy. And certainly there could be too much of that, but I think you have a system where it's not excessive, it's what's necessary so that things are done properly.
Well, thank you. Any other questions?
I would like to invite anybody who has any questions about the detail in the financial statement, call me or come into my office, because I'd be very happy to go all the way through it with you.
Yeah.
And if Richard wants to set up a work study or something to go through the financial statements, that'd be fun too.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. We'll go ahead and take our 10:25 recess. We'll take it for recess.